Sure. So this here is the picture that we're going to do today. And it's just a faint outline. Are the paints. I got them at Hobby Lobby. They're just the Fine Touch, I believe, and I got them for 50% off. You need a number 2 pencil, and usually I like the gummy eraser or the kneading eraser, but this has been working fine for me, just the back of this pencil. If the pencil is a good one, sometimes the erasers dry out and they'll leave a smudge on your paper, so thus you'll probably need a kneaded eraser, which will work better because you don't want to leave that smudge on your paper. These are good brushes that I found at a discount store, and I believe I can put a link to this lady's channel. It's her product line, and I really got a good deal on these. I'm really happy about these, and I like them really well. So I'm going to try using these today for my experiment. Sometimes I don't, just because I like to save what I have, because I can't seem to find them, but I think Walmart has them, and I can try to put a link on that as well. I have worn this one out. This is my favorite, and this one was a number 10. So I almost forgot also is the paper. So I got this paper at a discount store, and there's 30 sheets in here, and cold press, 140 pounds. So I think I paid $2.99 for all this, but I was really excited to get that because the paper right now is really expensive, and this will be the first time that I'm going to be using it too, so I really don't know how it works or how it's going to work with the watercolor, but we'll find out. For this particular piece, I want to mix colors together and find out what I like to use for this picture, which usually I don't. I usually just try to mix it as I go and then put it on the paper, but I think I'm going to do it where I'll mix up the paper, the color that I like. And these colors here I have aside, but these ones I'm going to put aside for another picture I have in mind. So I'm going to mix up in these little bowls instead. Alright, we're going to start with a clean glass of water, and I had put in some clean water into this little bowl with just a brush that I got out of a pack from Walmart, just any brush you want to use, and I put some of the blue. I guess I'm going to go with blue. I put the dark blue, took some of that, and put it in here to get a color, a nice rich color that I want. Because I might change that out and add some black or some other color just to lighten it up a little bit. But I might just keep this one for dark highlights. I'm not sure yet. The eyes I definitely want to keep as a red nose pit, because I do like the red nose pit, and they were kind of like a deep yellow goldenrod maybe. I'm not sure, but I will just see how that looks as I get going. But you can use any colors you want, so I recommend that you just get some colors together and see what you like and something that looks good for you. And I usually start with the eyes because the eyes are the most important. If you can capture the eyes, then that's going to be your focal point. And that's where I want everybody to look, is in the eyes. And then the rest could be kind of abstract and suggestive. So that is where I start. But for my colors, I just mix up what I want and kind of get them all ready. And I use a plastic plate that I got from Dollar General. They come in a pack of 3 or 2 or something for a few dollars, and you can just use that. Now if these paints dry, you can just add a little bit of water as you go, so that's okay. It doesn't bother me if they dry, because I can just reconstitute them and work them out to where I want them. So that's my one color I want. So I'm going to mix up a few more, and you can do that as well. Get the colors you want, and then we can proceed. I put a border around the paper and I just taped it onto the paper, a little bit of painting tape, and I sometimes will tape it to the table, but since there's so many people coming and going and I want this to be portable, I decided not to do it because it's going to take me a very long time to get this video done and this painting done. So I wanted to be able to move it. Usually I will tape it here and leave it for weeks, and it's usually in everybody's way. So I decided to do it this way instead. Now the experts recommend that you do tape it down to a surface, and also they recommend stretching the paper. So I will put a link to that to another person's YouTube channel that shows how to stretch paper. I've never done it. I don't intend to do it for what I do, so just in case you want to know how to do that, I'll put the link down there. So I start with the eyes first, because if I can get the eyes perfect, then I know I have a good piece, because the rest I can just, like I said, make it look suggestive, and then the focal point will be the eyes. So we will start with the dark center first. And I always leave a little white spot, and I've got that in there in this print that I did, the little highlight that is in there. And then on the inside we're going to paint that black. So I get a little brush, something that will do fine line, and I'm going to try to do it on dry paper. Now you could do it on wet, since we have a big enough space that you could drop the black in and just let it go, but I think I'm going to just do it on dry paper with the black ink. And the recommendation too is they tell you to go really light at first so that you can change your mistakes. It will give you a chance to give you some leeway to change any mistakes that you do. Now when you put down your first layer, you can go ahead and let it dry naturally, which is what I normally do because I can't stand here for very long periods of time. Or you could speed up the process with a hair dryer. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the black, and then I'm going to let it dry naturally, and then it will come back and finish the rest of the eye. Okay, so we have the first layer on, and this is where you can add a little bit more black to darken it up in areas that you want for the highlight, or to add a little bit more shine or spotlight, or the light to reflect off the eye. I forgot to mention that I did have an eyeliner brush. This is the one that I got from Walmart. It comes in a pack of 6, I think, but they're not very good quality. But it's a 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and it's really fine point. So this is what you can use to get around that highlight of the eye. So if you want to darken up the pupil anymore, this is the time to do so after it's been dried, and you can go back in and add some more. Okay, I put on another layer. I want to see if I can get this close enough that you can see. I tried to keep the darker black up around the white spots of the eyes to add a little highlight. So if you could get the black, it's almost like highlighting that white area. So you put the black mostly around that and try to get them as even as possible between the two. We're going to come back in and add more once we get more color around it. But later we're going to probably line this pupil with a little bit more black once we get the color of the eye in. So this looks good right now, and we can always add more later to fix it, but I really like it, and I'm afraid if I add too much more right now I might mess it up, because I have a tendency to do that, and so I might be able to fix it now at this stage if I do have a problem. So the next step will be to fill in the color of the eye, and that is the goldenrod or yellow. So you want to start with a lighter color first and do a layer, let it dry, or use a hair dryer, and then come back and add more color to the way you want it. Now you can look at another dog's picture online or whatever to look for reference to where you want the shading or where you want the light, but since it looks like I have the light directly in the eyes, I want to just keep the shading up around the edges of the eye. So it's going to be light. I'm going to keep it as light as possible, kind of like a halo or half moon down under the pupil, and then have the other edges closer to the pupil and down near the lid more darker. So I'm going to try to do that, and then we'll get back to lining it with some more black. Now to do the color in the eye, I'm going to go with this number 4 that I had out of the pack of brushes that I was talking about in the beginning of this video. And so this one has a little bit bigger tip on it, but this is just going to drop the color in. And what I'm going to do is probably wet the inside of the eye and then drop the color in so that I get that marble look that I want and make it look a little bit more prettier. And then I'm going to walk away and let it dry on its own, because it adds a little bit more touch to the color and how the watercolor works. So it will add more of a design that you can't get if you just quickly blow dry it and instead of letting it dry on its own. So here I'm just wetting it where I want the color to go. This doesn't have to be perfect. If you do the light wash, it's not necessary to be perfect, because you can always fix it later if it doesn't come out the way you want it. But if you keep the water in the line that you want and then add your color, then you should be able to fix it later, because the color will stay. And this is where I want the highlight to be of the eye. And I have a little paint in my brush from putting the paint in the other eye, but that's okay, because it'll work out just as good, because it's a light color, light wash. Okay, from that point I'm going to walk away and let it air dry on its own. Okay, the eyes have been dried, and it's been a while, so it's been completely dried. So we're going to go back in and wet the area around the pupil again for the color, and we're going to add in a darker color. So whatever color you chose, you can add in whatever you want. I'm going to keep on the outside edge because we want a darker color and we don't want to mess up the highlights. So I had chose a darker orange, or an orange with, to add that goldenrod look. want to keep my highlights there as much as possible. And you can run it around the underside of the pupil. Sometimes a little bit of that black will bleed into the line, but that will add a little bit more highlight. If you get too much water, you can just dab your brush to the paper towel and go back and lift that up a little bit and try a little bit more color if you take up too much color. Sometimes you can get away with adding it now while it's still wet, or you can wait until it dries and come back. And I'm just going to take the chance and put it in now while it's still wet. All right, and then you let that dry, or you can use a hair dryer at this point, whatever you prefer. At this point, I think I am going to go with the green around the eyes to add the highlight, and I'll probably do a green tone. I'm just going to try it. Not sure if it's going to come out, but we'll see. That's what experiments are all about, right? So I'm going to wet this area down around the eye. We're just going to go around the whole eye with some water. And this is the number 4. And then I'm going to drop in some green right close to our line. And I want it to add color, or let the color to go anywhere it wants to go. If it's nice and light anyway, we can fix it later. And this paper I'm not very keen on already. I'm not liking it because it's got so many grooves that it runs down into the grooves. So if you want a really nice picture, I would probably recommend doing some good quality paper. And I can't think of the names. I think ash is one of them. I think that's what they call it. Yeah, I'm not very happy with that paper, but that's okay. We're experimenting. I might lighten that up a little bit around the edge here, just to add that color. Just water only, just to spread out that color a little. And I don't know if it's because it's the green that I don't like, but we can spread it out with just plain water, and it will make it a little bit less harsh, which that already I'm not liking, but we can try to save it. Spread that out. Usually with the blue it just seems to go better, or maybe it's the paper, I am not sure, but we'll lighten this up, smooth it out some. And I think with this paper it's not as absorbent, because it's not taking the water in. It's like it sits right there. So maybe that's part of the problem. But if you just wet the brush and kind of smooth it out, it will take out those lines and not make it so dark. But it could be just the green, I don't know. I like to hear your comments, so if you have a comment about it or suggestions on what else to do different, let me know. Yeah, that looks better, not so harsh. Okay. So in the meantime, while that dries, I'm just going to try to stay away from it, and I'm going to go up here and wet this area. Wet a lot of it, I guess, because the paper, I don't know. And then I can add some a lighter green in there. This will just give me a rough outline of the head. Maybe it'll make me feel a little bit better. I usually do it with a blue, and it gives some highlight. This makes me feel like I accomplished something, and maybe it will look better that way. We're doing a light enough wash that we can always go back and fix things later, so not all is lost. I always call everything a hot mess when I feel like I messed up, and then later on in the end I'm really happy with what I got. So I always seem to call everything a hot mess. Constantly telling myself, what a hot mess. So I'm just wetting the paper and putting in a little bit of green here and there for shadowing. And this paper is not absorbing like I want it to. So it's just gonna have to be one of those things. Maybe that's why it's so cheap. But I guess you get what you pay for. I guess that's not too bad. Not exactly what I wanted, but this one I didn't quite rinse out my brush. And I'm just going in with some water, so it just gives a little bit of green highlight, but that's okay. Like I said, it's just a wash and it will be better in the long run if we keep it light. Yeah, there's something about this paper, but he's looking a little bit better. And once we get the highlights in around the eyes, I think it might be okay. So I'm just adding water around the edge of his muzzle because we do have that shadow underneath their chin. So we're going to keep that shadow if we can and go a little bit in here with some color. And this paper may work if you stretch it. I just, like I said, don't do it. And I don't know, maybe it's because I don't really do this as my profession. So, I mean, if you're going to be a really good artist, then you take the time out to do it. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm definitely not there anyway, but I'm far from being that. I just do it for my own hobby. Alright, I'll just get a little bit more green here, and then I'm going to let it dry and then reassess the situation. As I said before, it's just a hot mess. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Alright, straight off, I will say I was not using the right brush and not enough water. So I moved to a number 8 instead of that little one that I was using, which was bad on my part. This one held more water, and you could put water down and get a better medium for that color to go on. So that's number 1 or 2 problems that I had. So I think now I'm starting to like the green now that I got the shading down that I want, and I just put another layer of the green down around the shoulders. I don't know if you can see that, but now I gotta let that dry, and you can do that as well, or work whatever you want out. But let me see if I can move the camera and give you a better look. Okay, so this is a better view, I think. So the eyes are looking better now that they dried a little bit and they have that green dispersed. I think I like it. So the hot mess is starting to work its way out. And so over here I added more water and put in some more light green, and then I put it over here too as well to highlight his shoulders. And of course I drew in my signature heart that I usually put on all my dogs. So I do think I like the eyes now better. So I might highlight the pupil a little bit more with the black, and I might go a little bit green, darker green around the eyes to give it a mascara look, to highlight it, or eyeliner look, and that will bring out the eyes a little bit more. And like I said, if you can get the eyes looking real, then that will make the whole focal point and really bring out the picture. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll be back. to darken up the highlights or eyeliner around the eyes, you can add some water. And drop in a darker green. Or you can even add in a little bit of green mixed with black. Just give a little darker shade. And then you can just spread out that color with some water in your brush. And that will give it a smoother look. And sometimes you have a little highlight around the nose. You can just spread the water out to that. And you can come back with a really light amount of paint on your brush to add that line to show where the highlights are. And just keep it light, as I said before, because you want to make sure you can come back in and fix it later. And if you have a dark line right here that you don't like and it's too harsh, you can just add a little water to smooth it out, or let it dry and come back later with a clean dry brush or a clean brush with water, and then just rub it off a little bit. They have what they call scrubber brushes that you can use, which I can put a link below for that as well. I have a darker highlight over here on this side, and we can add that in too. You want to extend the water out beyond your paint so that when you let the paint bleed out, it will go into the outside water so you don't have a harsh line. You want to preserve as much as the white paper as you can for your white highlights. And we'll let that dry and come back and do some more. The nose, I wanted to go with some mixed colors, and I wanted to do a red nose pit, but I wanted to do some variation on the coloring. So I'm going to try and mix some colors on a scrap piece of paper to see if I can get the right color to go with the green that I wanted. So I'm going to try to work on that, and probably start with your light color, and I'm doing a number 8 brush, and I'm going to add some water here. I'm going to start out light first, so maybe the green, yellow green. And do a dab of yellow. I just want to get an idea of where I want the colors and what colors I want to use together and mixed. Kind of gives me a little brown, but I'm going to see what that looks like once it dries and go from there. I wasn't sure about the color on the nose, so I decided to go back to the eyes and do my eyeliner brush, and go back in and try to highlight the eyes a little bit more. So on dry paper, I just load my brush up with the paint I want, which I did a little bit of mix of black and green, and I'm going to go in and try to lightly highlight the eyes. So then I can decide what I want to do for the color on the nose. And I'll show you the colors I came up with. And I want this to bleed a little bit into the green that I got here. So I'm just wetting that down after I apply it to give it a faded black look into the green. But I start out on dry paper. And sometimes you can wet your brush a little bit more after you've got it applied to give that a little smudge, so it will blend in with the green, the black and the green. Plus you've got some green mixed in with that black, so it doesn't come off as too harsh, and then it will give you a better look. Now as you move to the inside of the eye, you want to eliminate your green that's mixed in with the black and go more with the black. And this too as well, you can moisten your brush a little bit once you get the paint off, and then go over what you applied, and that will blend it. Now if the paper gets too wet and it's starting to bleed too much, then you'll have to wait until the paper dries again before applying any more color. The key to be successful with applying this eyeliner to the eyes is to make sure you start out light in color, so you can always fix it later before you go on. But you always make sure that you let it dry good in between applications. And start out on dry paper. So load up your paintbrush with water to go back and try to blend this just before it dries. And then you can leave it alone. And if you have to dry it in between, go ahead with the hair dryer. So filling in the dark pupil, you want to start out on dry paper, and then once you've applied the black to the pupil, then you want to go back with a wet brush, wet clean brush, and try to spread this out so it will be like more a grayish color to add more depth to the eyes, or shadowing to the eye. So you're just kind of blending this out into the top of the lid. So it gives that illusion that there's an eyelid there. And then you want to have that dried as well before you go back and apply more. So we're going to go ahead and do the other side. So working on dry paper. Darken up this pupil. And if you have too much paint or water in your brush, you just dab it to the paper towel and then come back, and it will pick up a lot of that water, and then you can kind of spread the color. You can even darken up the line that's following the highlight, as I had mentioned before. And then just kind of spread that gray or the black so it'll turn gray, because it's diluted with the black, the water. So you can kind of spread that down into where you need your shadowing. And if it's still wet, you can kind of move a little bit of that black out from the pupil, just a little bit to make it turn gray, and that will add some highlight. Doing the eyes is a good place where you'd need a reference. So if you have a picture of a dog that you like the eyes on, you can go ahead and use that as your reference to get all the highlights in and all the shadowing that you need. So I'm just kind of winging this as best I can, and do the best you can on that. I mean, if you want, referencing is probably the best. Before working on the highlights on the eyes, you can definitely practice on a piece of watercolor paper to get the feel for the brush and how the paint goes down and the feel of how the paper works for you. I'm just going to go ahead and speed up the process for the eyes, and you can kind of work with it the way you want to do and till you're happy with them, and then we can move on. Sometimes with doing the eyes, I will rinse out the brush just a little bit, or just take a dab of water after I've already got the paint off it, and then when you go back in, you've got a little bit of gray left on there. So then you can kind of highlight the areas you want with just the gray or whatever's left over in your brush. Without reloading your paintbrush, this will help with keeping the paint light and not having to take off paint. I just had a flicker of the lights here. We have a big storm, so power may go out. When you get the highlights in the way you want it with the black, then this part here where we left a lighter color, you drop in a little bit of water after this is dried. You drop in a little bit of water here, and then you add a lighter color. And here I used yellow, and I put yellow over here as well. And then you let it dry, and then you go back and you're going to outline everything in black, a real strong black line, and then you let all that dry, and it should look a lot better. And then we'll move on to the nose. But once you get that highlight in there and it's dried, then you go back and you darken up all the pupils, or around the pupil. You want it to be a nice rich black. And if you have to touch up any other areas that need the dark, then do so then. Just go over the areas that you were over before to darken it up. And like I said, if it gets to a point where you need to stop and let it dry, then do so. And just take your time with the eyes, because you want the eyes to be perfect. And I like doing strokes downward, because then if there's a lot of paint on the brush, then the paint will stay up in the darker areas, so it gives that look of a gradient look from dark to light as you move down into the eye. So I'll go ahead and finish that up, and you do the same, and then we'll come back. To add more highlights, you can go in with a wet brush and just run along the upper edge, and then add some light green paint mixed with just a touch of black so that you get a really smoky green, and then just add it to that color, kind of like what we did in the beginning for the outline of the eyes. And that will add an in-depth look to those eyes. And then you let that dry, and then you can come back with more. But this added green black shade over that existing color that we first put on, or base color that we put on, will give it a more in-depth look. Sometimes I can't get the eyes looking the same, but if you can kind of work with it, but be careful that you don't overwork it because you could ruin it. So try to do what you can, but make sure that you dry the layers before adding any more, because if you don't like it and you come back later once it's dry, sometimes it looks a lot better than what it did. I wanted to move on with the nose now that I got the eyes kind of where I want them. I didn't know if I wanted the orange, so I wanted to go back and do the eyes and decide whether I wanted this color. This color I didn't mix up in the beginning, but I used it from that palette that I had made for another project, kind of like a red, dark red with a light red to make it somewhat pink, and then I added maybe a shade of blue to it, just a very slight amount of blue. But this is the color I come up with. I'm not sure if I like that one or I like this one, but this one's nice and bright. I might start out light just to see if I like it and then go from there. So I might go with this one and maybe add a little blue around the highlight and then some green. Let's see how it goes. Before we start, I have changed my mind again on the nose color. So I was going to go with this color, but then I decided to tone it down, so this is what I'm going with. This one looked like it would be more of a fit. It starts out with a color that I mixed up, and what I'm going to do is wet my nose. Get it wet all over in that area I want. Even where the nostrils are going to be. And then I'm going to take my blue that I mixed up, which is this one here. And I'm going to drop it in there. And when this dries, it will be light anyway. And you can kind of push up the dark colors around the edge. That's going to be your line, your highlight. And then I come back with a little bit of red. Rinse my brush, wipe it off a little, rinse it again, come back and just get just a tad of red and dab it in. Not too much, just a little. And then rinse that off, dry it out, rinse it, And then keep watering your brush and come back and get a little green. And the green you just want to dab in where this area, because we're going to go back and fix it later. But this is just to add a little highlight. And then let that dry and we'll come back. Real happy with how the color came out on the nose. So now that this is dry, I'm going to go back in and add the water to where the nostrils were going to be. I still got a faint line there I can see. So I add some water there. And I'm going to come back in with a drop of color. I'm going to probably start with a green, and I could come back with some black later. We'll see how this goes. And I'm going to let this dry and just see where or how it looks, and then go from there, because I want to get the nostrils even as much as I can and try to get the highlight. So I'm going to just let it dry, let it, as I go, have every spot dry. The lights are still flickering. Probably going to lose power today. So I thought about it. Before I let this completely dry, I'm going to add a little bit more water around the edge and let that bleed out just a bit. And this is almost dry. That way it'll have a softer edge. And it will bleed the green into the rest of it, and it'll give a little hard edge right here where the nostril is, so add a little depth to the surrounding color. So this is slightly dry. You can see that it was still a little bit damp. Just add a little pink or red, light red there. And that's just a little dab of pure red on my paintbrush from my palette. Just to give a little pink highlight. And I still got water in my brush, so it dilutes that paint out just a little bit. And then you can add a little water if you just want to integrate a little bit more of it into the area, because by now a lot of it's left your paintbrush. And this takes a little practice, getting to know your paintbrush, the paper, and how much water you got on the brush and so forth to be able to do that. But you don't want to work it around too much because you'll lose that marble effect. The mouth I'm going to keep kind of a dark green to keep in theme of all the color. So what I'm going to do is just wet the area that I want this lips to be. I'm going to wet the whole area because I want to go beyond the lines or the markings that I've got, because I want to integrate the color down into the lips, but I also want to keep the green as my highlight on the lines. So I want to add all this, and I got to work fast because I don't want it to dry. But I'm going to add the green for the line coming out of the nose. And it's going to look like a hot mess to begin with. Then I want to add some of that blue. And a little bit of the red. Not a lot, so hopefully mostly right in there. And I'm hoping that it will be nice and light when it dries, because it always looks like a hot mess. Talked about hot messes before. And then rinse the brush, and it's going to have a little bit of paint left on it, so I'm just going to highlight up in here that light color for the cheeks. And you might need just a dab more of the red to go up in here to highlight his nose, add some pigmentation. Just a dab of the red. Wet your brush, spread it out. Just a little dab of the red again with the brush. I'm just going to keep it to about here. And that's where the pink is all going to be. And then we'll come back with green. The painting's dry now, so we're going to go back in with some more green highlights. And I just want to fix this area right here. So I'm going to add the water where I want my highlights with the green, a little bit darker highlights. And I'm just going to do light shading so I can correct it as I go. Start out with light green, add in the green where the dark's going to be, or where you want the darker highlights, and kind of let that integrate. And then you can wet the brush with the paint still in it and come back and add more water where you want the light highlights. Add more water, keep it light. Gonna preserve some of that white for highlight. And we move over here, let that area, the other area dry. I want to keep some white here. I still have a light green on my paintbrush. This is just all water. I'm putting in where I want my highlights for the darker green, and we'll just go in with a light wash again and add that to your water. I'm trying to preserve some of my white highlights here, and then wet the brush again. It's still got paint in it. Going back in here to darken up this area. If it's too light, go back in, add some more paint. And then at this point, I'm going to let it dry. You can kind of go over the darker areas that we did in the beginning with just what's left in the paintbrush. Add a little water if you need to. Working with the number 10 or 8 brush, we're going to do the ears the same way we kind of did the rest of the body and the eyes, is that you wet down the ears, and where you want the highlight is where you're going to put the darker color. And once you wet it down and go beyond a little bit of the ear line, you're going to put in the dark green for your highlights. Just drop it in where you want the highlights to be in the ear, and then let that dry. So rinse your brush, dab it off, rinse it again, and go to the other ear and do the same thing. Drop in your darker color where you want the highlights to be. Kind of give a rough outline of where you want it. Sometimes I try to cover up my pencil mark at that time too. And as your paint gets out of your brush, you can use what's left for paint that's in your brush as darkening up some of the highlights you already had there. Okay, and we'll do a little bit more on this ear over here. Gonna put in the line to show where the ears are cropped. Add a little bit more green. And then the whole process is that you'll be doing this to finish up the rest, just kind of going in, adding water, and then darkening up. This is on dry paper that I'm doing here, but I just wanted to add the extra lines. I can go back and lighten that up a little bit as you go along. Sometimes I just add that in with a little bit of the extra paint that's on my brush. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but make sure that once you get the highlights in, like here, I like it just the way it is. I'm going to let it dry. I failed to mention, before I let this dry, it was just starting to dry. I added just a little bit more water up here in the corner, and I came in with some red like I did on the nose, and this is to indicate the inside of the ear. where it's been cropped, and I wanted it to have that marbled effect look, so I came in while it was still wet. That was slightly dark there. I rinsed my brush, and I'm going to do the same on the other side because it's still wet and I want to integrate some of that pink. Now if you think it's too dark, you can always come in and lift some of it, but I think I'll leave it because when it dries it will lighten up some, and I don't want to ruin that marble look. Now that the picture is dry again, we go back in with more water, and we are going to put it in places where you want the highlights to be dark again. Always go beyond where you want the paint to be so that it can bleed out into the area and look more natural. And every layer that you put over it will darken it up, the color, existing color that you got there. So I wet that area. The highlights I want is mostly in here. I probably went a little too dark on that, but I'll try to smooth it out here. Best I can. But the whole process, this is basically the whole process all the way through, is to keep wetting and add layers, let it dry, add more layers as you continue on until you get it the way you like it. I will post up my time-lapse video if this comes out good, so you can see the final project. But in the meantime, this is the gist of it, and I just wanted to share with it, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you liked it, please subscribe to my channel. Click the notification so that when I post new videos that you'll be able to see it. And share it if you liked it. Give me comments, feedback, anything. I know I'm not the best artist and there are better out there, but I do appreciate you joining me. And you'll see the time-lapse video. If it come out good, I'm gonna work with it a little bit more and see what else I can do. If it come out good, you'll see the video, and thank you for watching, and you have a good day.